Welcome to the deep dive. We are really thrilled you're joining us today because today we are looking at why a massive multinational corporation can proudly declare itself, 100% green while its supply chain is literally on fire.
Right, and why, legally speaking, they aren't even lying to you.
Exactly. We are getting into the incredibly murky waters of corporate sustainability reporting today. I mean, usually when you walk down the aisle of a grocery store or scroll through a company's website, you have this expectation of transparency, right? Like reading a nutrition label.
Yeah, you see a green leaf icon or the words carbon neutral, and it just feels comforting.
It does. It feels like you are making a clean, objective choice.
Well, it creates a very binary feeling for us.
Yeah.
You are either buying from the good guys or the bad guys. And honestly, we crave that simplicity. We want things to be neatly categorized so we can just make our purchase or make our investment and, move on with our day.
But the second you step into the actual machinery of how those claims are generated, that clear nutrition label completely blurs. You are constantly bombarded by companies claiming to be sustainable. So how do you, as a consumer or an investor, know what is an actual value-driven business strategy and what is just pure public relations?
What is just theater, essentially?
Yeah, theater. So today, we are exploring a concept that acts as the ultimate BS detector. It is a framework called materiality.
Yeah, and to unpack this, we are drawing from a really fascinating set of university lecture slides. These are from Professor Mikel Costola at the ICMA Center, which is part of the Henley Business School.
And the session is titled Materiality, Deciding What Counts.
Exactly, and that title is really the core of the entire issue we're looking at today.
Which is exactly what we need, because whether you are evaluating a company for your retirement portfolio or prepping for a corporate strategy meeting or just trying to be a smarter consumer, understanding what counts totally changes the way you look at every single business.
It really does.
So let's unpack this. A company could theoretically focus on everything, right? Carbon emissions, water usage, packaging, labor rights. But money and attention are finite. So how does a massive corporation decide what actually matters enough to act on?
Well, to understand why some corporate actions make the cut and others are just noise, we actually have to borrow a critical threshold from the accounting world.
Okay.
In traditional auditing, information is considered material if leaving it out would change a sensible reader's decision.
So it functions as a filter. It is not just a master list of every single thing a company touches.
Right, exactly. A material sustainability issue is one that is big enough to change a decision, either a decision made by the firm itself or by the people who fund it.
Can you give an example of how that works in practice?
Sure, let's take a soft drinks company. For them, sugar sourcing and water use are highly material. I mean, if they run out of clean water, they have no product, their factories halt.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
But, say, the specific brand of recycled office paper they use in their corporate headquarters, that is not material. It just doesn't move the needle on their operations at all.
Oh, okay. So if that beverage company dedicates 10 pages of their annual report to bragging about their recycled office paper, but completely ignores their water usage, that is what we are calling theater.
Yes, exactly. They are hyping up an immaterial issue to distract you from a material one. Pouring effort into immaterial issues does not pay off, and it crowds out what actually matters.
Right.
But the really complex part is that you can ask this question materiality in two totally different directions.
What do you mean?
Well, the first direction is what we call outside in. This is financial materiality. It asks a very specific question. Does this issue affect the firm's worth? Does it affect its sales, its costs, its risks?
So things that actively hit the bottom line.
Exactly. And there are two big financial concepts sitting behind this outside-in lens: enterprise value and cost of capital.
Okay, let's break those down.
So enterprise value is roughly what the whole business is worth to everyone who funds it, the owners who buy the stock and the lenders who provide the debt. And cost of capital is how cheaply the firm can borrow money to grow.
I want to pause on that, actually, because cost of capital feels like a term that gets thrown around in boardrooms but isn't always fully explained. Why does a company's stance on sustainability change how cheaply they can borrow money?
Well, think about it from a bank's perspective. If you are a massive lender, are you going to give a cheap 20-year loan to a coal plant? Or, say, a heavily polluting chemical factory that might be regulated out of existence in 5 years?
Oh, definitely not.
Right. No. You're going to charge them a massive interest rate to offset your risk. But a company with a stable, low-risk supply chain and no looming environmental fines, That is a safe long-term bet.
The safer the bet, the cheaper the loan.
Exactly. And cheaper debt means the company keeps more of its cash, which directly inflates the company's overall enterprise value.
Okay, so that is the outside-in direction. The wallet, what's the other direction?
So then we have the second direction, which is inside out. This is impact materiality. It asks, does the firm affect people or the planet?
Okay.
Economists refer to these as externalities. These are costs or benefits the firm imposes on the outside world that the market does not actively charge the firm for.
Like pollution. Right. If a factory dumps chemicals into a river, the factory doesn't pay for the cleanup, the local town does.
Yes, precisely. A factory's water use in a severely stressed, drought-stricken region harms a local community well before it actually dents the firm's financial accounts. The impact happens first.
Okay, so it's like evaluating a bad roommate.
Oh, how so?
Well, outside in, the financial materiality is asking, does their messiness cost me my security deposit? Like, it hits my wallet directly.
Right.
But inside out, the impact materiality is asking, does their messiness attract bugs that ruin the whole apartment building for everyone else?
That is a brilliant analogy.
Yeah.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, if an issue clears the materiality gate, either because it threatens the security deposit or brings in bugs, it then runs through the business model.
Got it.
It turns into a value or a cost, and it shows up in the financial metrics. But if it does not clear that gate, it never enters the chain at all.
But because an issue can point in these two different directions, the wallet or the world, there has to be some disagreement on which one companies actually have to care about, right? Like, who gets to decide which lens a company uses?
Oh, there is a massive global tug-of-war happening right now over exactly that. Regulators worldwide are fighting over which direction companies are legally forced to look.
And the lecture slides lay out two competing global rule books that are driving this fight.
Yes. So the first approach is single materiality. This is fundamentally the investor's question. It asks only the outside-in question. Could this affect the firm's value?
Just the wallet.
Just the wallet. This single lens is driven by the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, which is rapidly becoming the global baseline for corporate reporting.
And the UK is heavily involved in this one, according to the lecture.
They are. The UK Sustainability Reporting Standards, or UK SRS, which were adopted in February 2026, rely entirely on this single lens approach. It is entirely focused on enterprise value.
So the primary audience for a UK sustainability report is the investor.
Exactly. But then there's the other side of the tug-of-war. The second approach is double materiality.
Okay.
This is the society and investor question. It asks both. Does it affect firm value, or does it affect the firm's impact on the world? If the answer to either of those questions is yes, it must be reported.
You can't just drop an issue because it doesn't hurt your bottom line.
Right. And this framework is driven by the European Union CSRD, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and its specific reporting standards, the ESRS.
Now, here is where it gets really fascinating. The sources mention a specific update from 2026 regarding the EU. They passed an omnibus law.
Yeah.
Now, for anyone unfamiliar, an omnibus law is essentially a massive package of different legislative measures rolled into one single vote. It is usually where a lot of compromises happen.
Right. Lots of trading.
Yeah. So the EU used this law to simplify some of their reporting requirements, but they firmly kept this double materiality requirement for large firms. Specifically, any firm with over 1,000 employees and 450 million euros in turnover.
Right. They faced immense pressure to streamline and adopt the single lens to make things easier for corporations.
Yeah.
But they held their ground for those massive companies.
Wait, so you are telling me a UK company and an EU company could look at the exact same factory, the exact same operations, and produce two totally different sustainability reports?
Yes. The same firm produces a drastically different material list depending entirely on the lens. Let's revisit your soft drinks factory. Water use is always an impact material issue. Taking massive amounts of water out of a local ecosystem affects the world.
It attracts the bugs to the apartment building.
Exactly. But under the single lens, the UK rules, water only makes it onto the report if water in that specific operating region is scarce and threatens the firm's supply.
Which threatens their profits.
Right. If water is plentiful, it falls off the single materiality list entirely. But under the double lens, the EU rules, it stays on the list regardless, because the impact on the local watershed is still there. The lens completely sets the agenda.
That is wild. It means when you read a company's report, you are not just reading objective facts about what they do. You are reading a highly curated list dictated by whatever rulebook they happen to be forced to use.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's say a company operates in the EU and is forced to use the double lens. What's stopping them from just defining their impact in a way that conveniently leaves out the dirtiest parts of their business?
Well, that is exactly where we have to look at the boundaries of what they measure. Even once a firm knows which rulebook it has to follow, the way they draw the borders around their operations can hide massive blind spots.
How so?
A firm's carbon footprint is split into 3 scopes based on where the emissions actually occur. Scope 1 is direct emissions. The boilers, the ovens, the company vehicles.
With stuff they literally burn on site.
Yes. Then there is the energy they do not burn themselves, but buy from the grid. That is Scope 2. The emissions from the electricity, the heating, or the cooling that the company buys to run their buildings.
So Scope 1 and 2 are pretty much within the company's own walls. They have direct control over that.
But then you have Scope 3. And Scope 3 is everything else. It is the entire value chain. The suppliers upstream who mine the raw materials or grow the crops, and the product use and disposal downstream by the end customers.
Okay. The professor's slides use Nestle as a case study here, which is incredibly revealing.
It really is.
For a massive food and beverage giant like Nestle, it is not their corporate headquarters electricity that is the problem. The massive bulk of their emissions comes from farming and land use, sourcing cocoa, coffee, dairy. All of that sits in Scope 3.
Right, and for most consumer firms, Scope 3 represents the vast majority of their overall footprint. But it is notoriously difficult to measure.
I can imagine.
The data sits with thousands of independent suppliers, smallholder farmers in different countries, and millions of end consumers throwing away packaging. Firms usually have to estimate it using industry averages rather than metering it directly.
Wait, hold on. You're telling me that for a multinational company, the vast majority of their carbon footprint is just, an estimate?
In many cases, yes.
How is that allowed in a formal sustainability report? I mean, if I estimated my taxes, I'd go to jail. If a company puts out a glossy brochure bragging about being net zero, but they quietly exclude Scope 3 from their calculations because it's too hard to measure, isn't that just a massive loophole?
Oh, absolutely.
They're celebrating a clean office while their supply chain is on fire.
It is the definition of a loophole. If the carbon footprint is a material issue for a company, which for a global food giant it undeniably is, an assessment that ignores Scope 3 is missing almost the entire problem. It is theater.
So how do they decide this internally? Like, how does a company actually map out what is material and what isn't, especially when the data is this fragmented?
They use a tool called a materiality matrix, which is a structured judgment process. They list all the possible issues, ask stakeholders for input, and then score each issue twice.
Okay.
Once for how much it matters to the world, which is the impact axis, and once for how much it matters to the firm, the financial axis. Then they plot it on a chart. The top right of the chart are the things that matter to both.
Building this matrix is essentially like a corporate Rorschach test then?
How do you mean?
Two different companies can look at the exact same data point like plastic packaging, and depending on who they invited to the meeting, one files it under critical threat and the other files it under not our problem.
That is the perfect way to look at it. You have to look at who was asked to give those scores. A single materiality assessment usually just consults management and investors. It asks, what moves our enterprise value?
Which makes sense if you only legally care about the single lens.
Really? But a credible double materiality assessment must consult the people it actually affects. You have to ask the factory workers, the local communities living near the watershed, and environmental NGOs.
Yeah.
If a company claims to have done a double materiality assessment, but the consultation process never left the corporate boardroom, the resulting matrix is entirely hollow.
Because if you only ask the executives if they're being bad roommates, they're probably going to say no.
Exactly.
You have to ask the people living in the building with the bugs. But let's take that a step further. What happens if a company gets this matrix wrong? What happens if they look at an issue, say, well, the local community cares, but it doesn't affect our bottom line, so we're going to label it impact only and just ignore it?
This is where things get truly dangerous for corporate strategy. Materiality is not static. It moves over time. The academic term for this is dynamic materiality.
Meaning an issue doesn't just stay neatly in one box forever.
Right. Issues like carbon emissions, water scarcity, and plastic waste all started as impact-only externalities decades ago. There were problems for the world, but they did not really dent corporate profits.
Yeah.
But over time, through new government regulations, carbon taxes, or massive shifts in consumer reputation, those impact-only issues shifted violently into direct financial costs.
The lecture highlights a jaw-dropping case study of this happening in real time. The 2020 Rio Tinto Juukan Gorge case.
Oh, this is a devastating example of dynamic materiality in action.
For those who don't remember, Rio Tinto is a massive global mining group. And in 2020, they were expanding an iron ore mine in the Pilbara region of Australia. And as part of that expansion, they legally blasted the Juukan Gorge rock shelters.
Right.
These shelters had evidence of continuous Aboriginal occupation dating back 46,000 years.
Let's break down that catastrophe strictly through the materiality lens we have been discussing today. On a narrow, single financial screen, looked at purely through the lens of enterprise value inside the boardroom, one heritage site in a vast mining portfolio looked totally immaterial to a multi-billion-dollar giant.
And they literally had the legal permits from the government to execute the blast. From a pure compliance standpoint, they were in the clear.
They were, but on an impact level, on the inside-out axis, the destruction of a 46,000-year-old cultural site was enormous.
Yeah.
And the crucial lesson here is the speed of the shift. The moment that blast went public, the global outrage sparked an immediate investor revolt. It did not take years for regulations to catch up. It became financially material overnight.
Wow.
Shareholders demanded accountability. The CEO lost his job. 2 other top executives lost their jobs. The chairman eventually stepped down.
It's like a hidden corporate debt. You aren't paying interest on it right now, but you are carrying it on your books. And the second an NGO campaign launches, or a terrible headline hits the global press, that debt matures and the bill comes due instantly.
Exactly. Legally approved is no longer a defense against materiality. A newly material issue, whether it is uncovered by investigative journalism or forced by a new EU directive, is a fresh value or cost question for the business.
Right.
If the company handles it well and anticipates the shift, it can actually protect or create value. If they treat it as an annoying compliance box to tick, it becomes a massive cost. And if they just announce a vague policy without changing operations, it is pure theater.
Which brings us back to our BS detector. Materiality really is the ultimate filter. When you look at a company's sustainability report now, you can ask the structural questions. Are they using a single lens, just looking at their own wallets and investor risk? Or are they using a double lens, actually looking at their impact on the world around them?
And you have to remember that a materiality matrix is not an objective fact. It looks like a clean mathematical chart plotted on an X and Y axis, but it is a highly subjective judgment. It is shaped entirely by who runs it, who they consulted, and what regulatory rulebook they are following. 2 firms in the exact same sector can land on completely different lists of what matters, and both can defend those lists legally. You have to read a materiality matrix as an argument, not as an established fact.
Right. Don't look at it like a receipt from the grocery store. Look at it like a persuasive essay written by the company's PR and legal teams.
Exactly.
Speaking of things that look objective but might be hiding something massive, the source material ends with a really provocative teaser for the professor's next session.
Oh yeah, Session 3 points toward the future of how we track all of this.
We just spent all this time learning that we have to properly measure what counts. We have to map out those massive Scope 3 emissions hiding in the global supply chain, tracking thousands of suppliers. And to measure billions of data points across those supply chains, companies are increasingly relying on massive artificial intelligence models to crunch the numbers.
Which requires an astronomical amount of computing power and massive data centers.
Right. AI's own massive energy demand is skyrocketing globally. So will the very AI tools that companies use to solve their sustainability reporting become their next hidden, deeply material financial risk?
It's a huge question.
As they build these giant data centers just to track their carbon, are they just creating a brand new massive carbon footprint that will hit their enterprise value in a few years? It is definitely something for you to keep an eye on.
It becomes the ultimate irony in corporate reporting. The tool used to map the externality becomes the externality itself.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. The next time you are walking down that grocery store aisle and you see that comforting green leaf icon or that clean, simple sustainability claim on a package, I hope you look at it a little differently. Not just as a neat binary fact, but as a very deliberate choice. A choice of what that company decided to count and what they decided to hide. Until next time.